Hello, my name is Peter Kennedy-Gane and I'm a senior judge, Alpaca judge with the Australian Alpaca Association. I've been asked by the Australian Alpaca Association to just run through a presentation of judging of a Suri and Alpaca fleece. We were hoping to get you as the breeder to have a better understanding of the process. We may encourage you to enter your fleeces in the upcoming National Fleece Challenge. Obviously during 2020 with COVID-19 it's been impossible to have shows in person, and so this fleece show is a great way of getting your fleeces and your animals assessed. Firstly, the fleece entries, when you're doing those, you'll have to enter in a range of information about the fleece, and that is then subsequently supplied to the convener of the show and is used to prepare your entries at the show. When the fleece arrives at the show, each individual fleece is weighed to calculate their actual weight. This fleece has been weighed and physically weighs here today 805 grams. The information that was supplied by the breeder was that the fleece had been grown for 6 months on the animal, and so obviously all our shearing dates are different across the country, and so we use a mathematical calculation to standardise the fleece weights back to as if all animals have been shorn at exactly 12 months of age, and that is done by the steward at the show. This, as I said, was grown for 6 months, so it will go through the process and be standardised back as if it had been grown for 12 months of age. So that calculation runs through the actual rate of 805 grams is divided by 6 for the 6 months of growth, and then multiplied by 12 to bring it back to 12 months. And so it is then calculated as an annualized fleece weight of 1.61 kilograms. When the judge arrives at the show, they are working off specific worksheets and which have been developed by the showing and judging committee here in the AAA and approved by the board. It is broken up into a range of attributes that are seen to be important for both the end user of the fleece, but also to you as the breeder to maximise your returns on your fleece production. Each attribute is assigned a range of points based on its relative importance, and as a judge we work through those individual attributes to assign specific points, and they are added up to then come up for a total for the individual fleece. Each class is worked through one by one. Each fleece is just looked at as it is. It's not compared to any other fleece in the show at the time. Each point is specific for that fleece, and we then just do the final calculation at the end, and the placements are based on the highest scoring fleeces in each section. We also in Australia use a annualized weight and micron matrix that has been developed from information we have gathered over the years from many of our shows. Many of our shows use a micron tested process, and so each show entry is actually tested through a micron machine. That data has been kept, and both their weight and micron data has been fed through a mathematical formula to come up with this matrix, and so we use that ongoing. And again, that was developed by the showing and judging committee and approved by the board for use by all Australian judges in our shows. When we come to the individual fleece, the fleece is presented as well as possible. Obviously it should have been well skirted by you before it has been entered into the show. We then would take a range of samples from across the blanket area to give us a representation of what the fleece is presenting to us here. As you can see, I've previously pulled out a range of samples. We usually work on about 6. In this situation, I'll be doing an individual micron assessment. Obviously, we don't have a micron tester here at home in Melbourne. And so I will open up the individual fleece samples, assess them all, and come up with what I think is the micron for the fleece in question. This is looking very fine. Looking at the individual locks before me. And so I would assess that as 17 micron. So now I both have the micron at 17, the annualized weight at 1.61, and I can just then compare that to the matrix and come up with the point allocation for that section. And we have a total of 30 points available for that micron and annualized weight matrix. So looking at the micron at 17, the weight at 1.61, and so that would be given 22 points in total. The next attribute we look at is handle, and that attribute is given 5 points in total. Coming back to the fleece, we're looking at the cut side. Especially with Suris, we need to open up the lock to make sure that we can get into that, and we're obviously ensuring that we're assessing what the fleece is doing, taking into account any environmental impact you may have if you come from a clay soil or a dustier soil. We try and accommodate that. It's got a beautiful soft handle to this fleece, and so I would give that 4.5 points out of 5. The next category is uniformity of micron across the entire fleece, and that's given a total of 10 points. This is obviously an important attribute because though you may have a very fine fleece at mid-side, if there's a lot of variation or lack of uniformity across the blanket area, it may end up being downgraded by the end user, and so you as a breeder could be getting paid less than you're previously expecting. Looking at this fleece, it's looking very uniform, and this comes into play where skirting is important, and so I'm very happy with that, so I would give that 8 out of a possible 10. Then the next category is uniformity of micron within the lock. Here we're trying to see the difference in micron between the primary and secondary fibres. Again, we have to open that up and look also at the ends to see if there's any visible higher micron primary fibres running through the fleece. This again is looking very uniform in that attribute, and so I will award that 8 out of 10 as well. Next is uniformity of length, and so again we're looking at the staples, or the locks in this case. Looking at those, they're looking very uniform, and so out of 5 points I'd give that 4.5. Uniformity of colour, again this is a light fawn fleece, so I'm looking at the uniformity of colour both across the blanket area, which is quite consistent, and then within the lock as well, to see if there's a darker primary in a black fleece, if there's a white fibre running through it. This is looking very consistent. We have to look at it carefully to make sure that what we're seeing is not affected by dirt. I think it's very uniform, so I'd give that 5. Next category is style and density of lock. This is a second fleece, so it's been previously shorn in Suris that we do get quite a difference in style and presentation of the fleece between the first fleece and subsequent fleeces in regrowth. This has come back very well, We can see the individual locks well defined. It has got a really pleasing level of fleece in each individual lock, especially taking into account the level of fineness through that fleece. And so I would give that an 8 out of 10. Next category is lustre. And in Suris, obviously, the lustre is a defining attribute of the fleece. We have 15 points allocated for that attribute here. As you can see, it's got a beautiful reflective character, and that's indicating the uniformity of the shape of the fibres making up the fleece in total. And so I would give that 14 out of possible 15. Next category is impurities. This is again where your skirting will come into account. It's looking fairly clean, has a little bit of dirt just with the grease. Not a lot of vegetable matter. It's very well presented, very little, as you can see on the table, so I'd give that 4 out of 5. And the final category is effective skirting. So again, this is where you can play a very important part. We're wanting uniformity, as we said. We're looking for second cuts. We have a few smaller pieces through there. We check for any tenderness in the fleece. This is looking sound. Again, it's well skirted, very little variation coming through. So I'd give that 4 out of 5. So I've now allocated all the points for the various categories. That would be added up. And adding that up, it comes out to 82 out of possible 100. In the show, this fleece would be put away. I would then move on to the next fleece. And working through the class, whichever comes out with the highest score would end up in first place. Whichever fleece comes up with the highest score in a particular section would end up with the championship. And that's how we work through a Suri Fleece.